The United States of America launched an attack against an Iranian Marine regiment during the early hours of this very morning as part of ongoing preparations for potential ground operations targeting Iranian islands and coastal areas. This incident occurred in the extremely strategic city of Bandar Abbas, especially when considering the Strait of Hormuz. It was the Iranian media outlets that reported on the precise nature of these strikes earlier this morning. In fact, they even went so far as to announce the killing of one of the most significant leaders of the Iranian Navy and proceeded to publish his photograph, clearly identifying him as Mosayyeb Bakhtiari, as we can observe from the funeral procession held for this commander, which clearly highlights the immense importance of this particular commander to the Navy, especially during such extremely sensitive times. On the contrary, Iranian circles have released images today with today's date, as we can clearly observe, demonstrating that a very specific location had been targeted and struck, and it was hit precisely within the area of Bandar Abbas. If we try to examine the nature of this picture, first we will notice that we are in front of this road, the building, the entrance and the wall. We also notice these towers that we can see, and this is the building. We are trying to make the most of every single detail visible within this image, and we will quickly proceed using the satellite directly towards the Strait of Hormuz, and we will then clearly observe that this location is Bandar Abbas. This is the specific naval base belonging to Bandar Abbas, which is indeed considered a very significant military maritime point, and this is precisely the structure that was prominently appearing right in front of us. You can thus observe from the very nature of this building here that we are indeed seeing the same identifying marks initially, and you can clearly see this entrance, the surrounding wall, and these distinct towers. Consequently, this is precisely the building that was targeted, and which numerous Iranian sources have confirmed serves as the primary point of communication, connection and logistical linkage for the Iranian Navy of Wadifi. In other words, this is the central point from which all naval operations of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps are coordinated specifically for execution in the Strait of Hormuz. Furthermore, updated satellite images clearly showed that the Nayban naval base, this entire area, was completely struck. All its warehouses and all capabilities designated for military purposes facing the Arabian Gulf were hit. It's quite evident from the black color that it has been severely damaged and utterly destroyed in this particular region. Consequently, every single important point situated along the Iranian coastlines, whether within the Strait of Hormuz or extending towards the Arabian Gulf or even the Gulf of Oman, is being intensely targeted. Though in fact the Israeli side is operating shoulder to shoulder with the United States to strike the Iranian Navy, as they announced today that they had targeted a location in Isfahan connected to the Iranian Navy and have carried out operations. By presenting this image of the structure they targeted, and they have asserted that this particular location, where all naval warships, submarines and other vessels are meticulously developed and designed, is an extremely crucial and strategic point for the Iranian Navy. Consequently, it is quite possible that my chosen target, the senior commander within the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, could very well have been killed right here, or perhaps at the precise location we previously indicated in Bandar Abbas. Consequently, all of these critical points located along the Iranian coastlines specifically are now being subjected to intense and sustained bombardment, struck from not just two, but even three separate directions. Firstly by Israel, and then also by the formidable American strategic bombers that are arriving from Fairford Air Base in Britain. If B-52 aircraft as recorded today, or even B-1B Lancer strategic bomber, whose flight operations were also recorded yesterday almost every day, 4 to 6 American strategic bombers fly from Fairford Air Base to carry out these strikes, specifically at the Strait of Hormuz, the Arabian Gulf, and also the Gulf of Oman. However, when we are specifically talking about this particular building, which functions as the Iranian Navy's primary communications point, it becomes quite clear that this strike was not delivered by a strategic bomber. It was, in fact, a highly precise surgical strike, given that all the other structures immediately adjacent to this specific building remained completely unharmed, and this naturally presents a very logical situation. And this that clearly shows you that the American aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln, currently here, following its most recent update since yesterday, was the one that specifically carried out this operation. This in turn is what prompted the Iranian Navy today to attempt to target the Abraham Lincoln. The Goters guard stated that they had indeed targeted the aircraft carrier, but it managed to change its position. This is a natural maneuver for the Abraham Lincoln, given all the defenses it possesses. It constantly conceals itself and maneuvers, yet it continues these operations, which are of course greatly pressuring the Iranian interior. The crucial aspect in this particular situation is that all these aforementioned strikes, which are which are specifically targeting naval assets in highly critical areas, are unfolding against the backdrop of official announcements from the United States of America confirming that 3,000 members of the 82nd Airborne Division have been directly dispatched to the broader Middle East region. And there was a recording from Pasha report which which documented multiple aircraft taking off from Fort Bragg military base which serves as the primary staging area for the 82nd Airborne Division, suggesting that this particular deployment may have already commenced and that this division could now be prepared to execute an operation targeting one of the islands or the Iranian coastlines. And we must not forget the USS Tripoli, which specifically carries hundreds of Marines. The USS Tripoli was present yesterday, according to updated satellite images from the Diego Garcia base in this region. And the satellite updates, or rather the satellite imagery from the early hours of this morning, confirmed its presence there yesterday. That it is still there in Diego Garcia. As we also noticed, it appeared the USS New Orleans, which is also considered one of the ships loaded with hundreds of American Marine soldiers, is also present at the Diego Garcia base. However, there was an update in the past few hours from Ant Anderson, who has been closely tracking the movements of the USS Tripoli, the vessel we've been discussing, and it has now become apparent that it has completely disappeared from Diego Garcia. And notice, indeed, there is a destroyer now present in place of the USS Tripoli. As we observe, if we get closer to it, this is a destroyer. This is not the USS Tripoli. And if you observe the image of the USS Tripoli, you will certainly notice that it appears entirely different. Its form is distinct, and it's quite evident that the USS Tripoli, this indicates it has already departed from the area, and that it is now moving at a high speed following the arrival of the USS New Orleans, which we previously discussed, and it is attempting to make its way and head directly towards the Iranian coasts. It is fully anticipated in light of previous timings reported by the Wall Street Journal, which I have spoken about over the past 2 days, that it will be entering the U.S. Central Command area this coming Friday, as is widely presumed. Certainly, in the next 2 days, we will hear news that it and the Marine Corps have arrived in the Central Command area, and this adds considerable power to the U.S. Navy. Furthermore, we must also pay close attention to the movements of U.S. military aircraft. Observe, for example, that just yesterday there were all of these F-16 fighter aircraft, which we can obviously see right here, and there are approximately 7 of these jets, as we can all clearly notice, and these specific aircraft then flew out in that direction, and they continued flying until they reached the Nevatim Air Force Base located over there. The Israeli stealth F-35s, of course, the Israeli stealth aircraft flew and reached this region coming from the United States of America. Also, at the same time, more of these aircraft made the same journey today. As we note, this is March 25th. Take note of all these 7 F-16 aircraft as well, and that they have in fact already proceeded directly towards that very same base, which was the primary launch point for the Nevatim Air Base. And as a result, we are now observing a substantial number of F-16 aircraft commencing their movement towards the area, alongside the advance of the Marines and the forward movement of the 82nd Airborne Division. And this also includes the Delta Force, which is regarded as a highly classified unit within the American Special Forces. This never moves with an announcement, but rather surprises you at the very location it aims to target. And naturally, the United States here faces several solutions. This is what should be expected from the nature of what is coming between the United States and Iran if there are no diplomatic arrangements, as is currently the case. That's the United States and the 82nd Division are initially capable of controlling Karg Island. This is the primary issue that will prevent the Iranian side from exporting oil. And of course, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard imposes its complete control over the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore negotiations will begin here with the Iranian side. You must abandon the Strait of Hormuz, and we will be lenient regarding the issue of Karg Island, and there will be negotiations with you so that you can resume exporting oil once again. As for the other alternative for the United States, which is a rather interesting solution, it is for the United States of America to come and establish control over key islands located within the Strait of Hormuz. We are discussing the island of Qashm and the Greater and Lesser Tunb Islands, and also Abu Musa, or even more precisely, Larak Island, as well as the establishment of a buffer zone here, a secure area, if you will permit the expression, and the removal of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps from this particular region. Now, what this equation will achieve for the United States of America, should they truly succeed in shaping this region and carrying out this landing, is that they will, as a primary objective, ensure the safety of ship traffic and international maritime navigation in this particular area. that destroyers can accompany these ships على فتنات الكام, and therefore the Iranian side is only capable of targeting these ships from a distance. Yani this will not be enough with destroyers that can accompany the ships without any problems. And he also at the same time controlling the Strait of Hormuz in this way will achieve an important matter, which is Karg Island. Quite simply, Iran is not permitted, even if it continues to maintain its control over Karg Island, to traverse the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, the Iranian side is compelled either to engage with the American side, or the Iranian regime will inevitably collapse economically. But a third alternative scenario, which could prove devastating for the Iranian side if it were to materialize, is for the United States to seize control of the islands in the Strait of Hormuz and effectively reshape this entire region, in addition to conducting a landing operation on Karg Island, consequently leading to Iran completely losing all control over its oil resources and the strait itself.
And this in itself is a very significant defeat
against the Iranian Navy and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Therefore, for the United States, the logical first step here would be to strike the communication hub of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, as we've discussed, particularly here in Bandar Abbas. This is clearly preparing for precisely these kinds of operations and scenarios. However, American circles generally, and even experts and analysts alike, are focusing on the crucial fact that the United States at
Karg Island will be the main focus of the attack.
This is precisely the main point, the very thing that the United States might be actively searching for and attempting to establish its control over right from the outset. However, there are ongoing negotiations, given that the American side has already presented 15 specific points to the Pakistani delegation. Pakistan acknowledged this matter and proceeded to hand over these specific items to the Iranian side. The Iranian side's reports are somewhat contradictory concerning the exact nature of their requirements. On some occasions, they express criticism regarding this specific issue, while at other times they state they are currently examining this particular matter. However, generally speaking, they are far from being content. In fact, they have already put forward their detailed conditions for these ongoing negotiations, and the Wall Street Journal has indeed published reports concerning this very topic. The conditions, quite simply, from the Iranian side state that the United States of America must first and foremost halt the current conflict and ensure that there will be no further hostilities in the future, with concrete assurances provided concerning this matter. Additionally, the strikes targeting Lebanese Hezbollah must cease immediately. They did not, however, negotiate regarding the Iraqi factions, as is clearly evident from the Wall Street Journal. They also said at the same time that they want to impose fees in the Strait of Hormuz, just like Egypt does with the Suez Canal, and this is an issue we don't pursue, as Iran claims. They also said there will be absolutely no negotiations on the missile program in any way with the American side. At the very same time, they also declared that all American military bases must be removed from the Arabian Gulf region, and naturally these specific conditions, whether we are referring to their demands regarding missiles, or perhaps their insistence on certain fees, or even their call for the withdrawal of American bases, these are all extremely complicated issues that the United States of America simply does not want and will absolutely not accept. Therefore, most American and Western circles, now even within Iran, see that reaching an agreement on this issue has become complicated. The Iranian side seems to realize that things will escalate and has begun to exert significant pressure on southern Israel. Air raid sirens today continuously targeted the city of Dimona, as we observe, and somewhat threatened the Dimona reactor over the past 3 days. The Iranian side is currently focusing on this particular issue. But early this morning, we were presented with this scene until a missile landed very close to the Dimona nuclear reactor. It struck a specific point in this manner, as we can clearly see right here on the screen. This specific point that was struck, as we can observe, it happened exactly in this way, and the point that was targeted by the strike was right here in this location. It looks like an ordinary point, completely unrelated to the reactor if we were to approach it by satellite to take a look at it and its potential danger to
Dimona plant.
How far is it from the Dimona reactor? We'll observe by getting closer with the satellite to see the area. Look, this is Dimona city, and this is the Dimona reactor. This is the precise point that was targeted by this missile, almost right here at the entrance. It's a point that is connected to the entrance of this facility, and it's linked to chemical operations, as some reports have, of course, indicated. So the point we discussed, the one that was hit, is this very area. If we consider it, this is precisely the point that was hit by the Iranian side. The main problem in this area we're discussing is that it's about 7.3 kilometers from the Dimona reactor. This means the Iranian side claims it struck this point, hitting Dimona city and the civilians here. the Iranian side is capable of striking the Dimona reactor if matters escalate further, primarily from their end. Also, Iran faced a very serious strike that targeted a power plant, the Hadera plant, which we will see here, and which had been hit. Now you'll notice that the distinct nature of these chimneys, or rather these particular columns, the precise point where the missile struck was right here. And if we proceed towards this station, you will clearly observe the impact of this explosion and these very columns themselves. The station was not significantly affected, not fundamentally affected, as the Israeli side stated. However, the strike was serious, and this is, of course, considered one of the energy facilities. And the Israeli side today has approved striking targets deep inside Iranian territory. So why is this considered such a problem? Because if the Israeli side's energy infrastructure is targeted, and considering the United States and its president have essentially issued threats regarding this issue, then this truly opens the door for the Israeli side to retaliate. And this could ultimately be precisely what Iran desires, for a very significant reason: to strike. That damage is inflicted upon an Israeli energy facility. Israel then proceeds to strike energy installations, perhaps with the United States involvement, given the threats made by US President Donald Trump. And here, Iran responds to energy facilities, whether power plants or water desalination plants in Saudi Arabia or elsewhere. This situation could potentially trigger a swift reaction from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia against the Iranian side, and it might also open the door for the Houthi group in Yemen to launch strikes targeting the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, potentially leading to the closure of the Bab al-Mandab Strait. And then US President Donald Trump would arrive to issue orders for a landing on Karg Island, or even to advance toward the Strait of Hormuz to gain control. And here, as we can clearly see, if circumstances were to escalate in this fashion, oil prices would undoubtedly skyrocket. And this might be precisely what the Iranian regime is aiming for, to achieve success in this whole operation, ultimately at the end of this entire story. We observe that today we are facing an oil depot located in Kuwait, which was also struck in this manner by an unknown drone. It is not definitively known.